All right, looks like we can get started now. So, first episode of the Cyber Centaur, the show that is half human, half cyber. Now, before we get into like introductions and things like that, I want to explain the title because I've gotten mixed reviews on it. This was just, a making of my own sort of crazy mind. And basically, the show, I wanted something that was going to demonstrate the show. I wanted to expose not only the technical side, but the human side, right? Half and half. So I thought about a centaur, and a centaur is more rare than a unicorn, right? Which is cool. And we always hear about cyber unicorns. But then I also thought about the cyber centaur sounding like the cybersecurity center, right? Where you come for all your cybersecurity knowledge. So it's like a play on words, as well as, like a pretty cool title. So tell your friends so that they can listen to episode 1, maybe see the next episode, and so on and so forth. So I'll introduce myself as the host. My name is Samara Williams. I am the manager of threat operations at Cardinal Health, and we focus on threat intelligence as well as vulnerability management. I have the pleasure of having a co-host by the name of Helen Patton. Helen, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So hi, everybody. If we haven't met yet, we will. But for those of you we have not met yet, my name is Helen. I used to be, up until about a month ago, the Chief Information Security Officer at The Ohio State University, and I did that wonderful job for about 8 years, but I've recently changed. And so now I'm the advisory CISO at Duo Security, which is part of Cisco. So I've gone over to the dark side, and I am part of the security product team over at Duo and Cisco. And learning a new gig. So happy to be here and be talking with everybody, especially Samara. I am the back end of the centaur.
If you could say that each episode, that would be appreciated. Thank you very much. So our guest today is Tony Gilbert, a good friend of mine, who's one of the first sort of mentors I had moving to Columbus, getting into cybersecurity. So Tony, do you want to introduce yourself?
Samara humbles me. So Tony Gilbert, I am the Director of Information Security over at Licking Memorial Health Systems. It's a mid-sized healthcare organization out in Newark, Ohio, out in Licking County. The goal of our organization is really to help improve the health of the community. And I've been there for about a year, and been doing some really cool things since my time there. Before my taking on this role, I was a senior engineer over at Cardinal Health on the cybersecurity operations side. Just an individual contributor building out or helping build out solutions to help keep that organization safe. Overall, I've been in cyber for about 10 some odd years, a little bit over that. And just enjoying the ride thus far. Happy to be here with you all.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. So before we get started on the topic today, which is threat actors, we're going to put out a poll to see what kind of technologists we have in the audience today. That can help us tailor the conversation to you a little bit better. So we'll give this a couple seconds.
We should have put an other option on the poll. Note to self, next time.
Yeah.
Sorry. I guess if you're an other, you go non-tech on the poll.
Noted. Future episodes. Who gets the results? Is the person that, oh, here we go. Does that mean everybody voted now that I'm seeing the results? Nice. So we got a good cybersecurity bunch. This is good. We can go ahead and dig in. So I don't think I need to explain what cybersecurity is then, right? That was a check mark here for me. So the reason we started episode 1 about threat actors is because I think it's going to lay really good groundwork for future episodes, right? When I think about cybersecurity and the reason it exists, it would not exist if not for threat actors exploiting vulnerabilities. within people's networks, right? That's at least my take on it. So first question we got here is, what are threat actors? Tony, do you want to take that one on?
I'll take that one on. And I think, the answer to that question really depends on who you're talking to, really.
Mm-hmm.
There's different types of threat actors. And, for me, I would classify like 4 different types, right? But within those 4 different types, there's obviously subtypes of threat actors in there as well. I would say the first would be your cyber criminals. These are the guys that's motivated by profit, right? They often work in groups. They're well organized, well equipped, and they have tools and knowledge to pull off attacks that can really cripple an organization. Things like your ransomware threat actors, right? Or your advanced persistent threat actors. These guys would fall within that category. There's also your hacktivists, right? Those are your hackers who are not really motivated by money. They usually have like a political or technical agenda behind why they do some of the attacks that they do. I read an article. It was actually funny. I read an article last week. For those who are not in cybersecurity, right? In the past 3 or so weeks, Microsoft's been having a really bad time. With Exchange being 4.0 days being exploited out there from the Exchange environment, Microsoft servers. From this article that I read last week, this Microsoft server that is designed to really allow admin to download what's called a hybrid configuration wizard. This is a wizard that's used to connect your on-prem Exchange environment to an on-prem Exchange environment. That server got compromised, right? And instead of malware, what the threat actors did, they actually put a text file in there for anyone who browse out to that site and download that file. And that text file literally reads, if Microsoft cared about security, they would never have published their own binaries to the customer. There's some other things in there as well, but the point I'm making is, there's people who are hacking not really motivated by money or malicious reasons. They're doing it really just because they have an axe to grind and they want to show people that they can actually exploit these vulnerabilities, and there's other agendas and motivations behind it. There's your state-sponsored attackers. These are your government-backed agencies, your cyber command as an example. And there's the insider threat, right? These are the people that's inside your 4 walls that really pose a threat to your organization's data. There's different reasons why someone would be labeled as an insider threat, and we can talk about that. But overall, 4 categories of threat actors, I would say, that's out there. So I'm not sure if Helen would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. I think when I think about threat actors, I classify them into a couple of different camps. One is, are they the kind of threat to an organization where they're going to target the organization or people within the organization for some reason? So, we look at the solar burst stuff that happened over the holidays, right? So the Russian wavy hands bear holiday event. Even though the software that was malicious sort of went everywhere, they aren't finding that it was activated everywhere. And it seems to be that the purpose of that particular attack, although it's still being determined, but the purpose was really around espionage of information coming out of federal government agencies, right? So I think there are those sort of threat actors, and they can be nation state threat actors. They could certainly be insider threats that are going to target you for some specific reason. Way back when NASA had its website defaced because somebody was PO'd at the NSA and didn't know how to spell, and they went after the wrong website, right? So, threat actors could be targeted, but the fact that you have an internet presence also makes you a threat, because there's a whole bunch of commodity threat actors out there, right? So they're the people who go and buy some ransomware kit or some malware kit, and they just see how much damage they can do ubiquitously. And if you are exposed on the internet with some kind of unpatched vulnerability, or maybe even not an unpatched vulnerability, maybe you're just click happy, you're going to get got just because you're on the internet. And so I think there's a couple of different flavors. And as security professionals, we worry about all of those things, I think. But where it's a really hard sell for our employees and our customers is our employees and our customers go, I'm not anybody important. They're not going to come after me. And what they're thinking of are those threat actors who would target them. And we could have arguments about whether or not they're going to be targeted. I'm going to target you for your unemployment benefits check, or I'm going to target you for your tax refund, or I'm going to target you for those things. But more generally, just being able to explain to folks the fact that you have an internet life makes you a target for this whole section of threat actors is part of the fun of being in security, I think. So yeah, Tony, agree with you. Absolutely.
I think what gives me the most heartburn, especially working for Cardinal Health and pharmaceuticals distribution, is the ones that are just out there to disrupt and destroy. I think it's because I don't necessarily understand them, right? So Tony, from a hospital perspective, right? Because Cardinal Health isn't really a hospital, but what would you say your top sort of 3 threat actors that give you the most heartburn are?
To Helen's point, the commodity threat actors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the guys that's just blasting. They're blasting worms and different sort of malware to my end users. These are the guys, when I first took on the position at Licking Memorial, and I really did a survey of my environment, right, where I invited my end users to just communicate with me about what they understand from a cybersecurity perspective. And I quickly learned that cybersecurity wasn't part of what was built into the fabric of that organization. So it wasn't something my end users really paid attention to. So when I say your commodity threat actors, they have, because my end users aren't necessarily thinking about cybersecurity, those commodity threat actors, the guys that's just spamming us with malware and just coming in through email, we have a very big gap, right? And where folks would literally click on these things. And so that's one, the threat is another one for me as well, right? So that would be my second biggest threat actor, so to speak. Again, because my end users, I've realized the culture, the cybersecurity is not part of the culture there. Because of that, they're liable to hand over passwords. They're liable to hand over information that they shouldn't be handing over to people that they shouldn't be giving that information over to. Tell you a funny story. We did me and one of my guys, we went to a few of our remote locations, just doing an audit, just wanting to see, because obviously we're a hospital, so we hold into HIPAA. And so we're doing a HIPAA audit, just walking around some of the facilities, seeing whether or not data is being stored where it should, whether or not folks are leaving screens up with PII on it, personal information on it, for everyone to see, whether or not our PCs are placed in areas where they shouldn't be. So we're just doing an audit. We walk into one of the facilities, and one of my guys just walk up to the nurse, and he said, yeah, we're with IT. We need to get back here. Can I have your badge so I can let myself in? She literally hands him the badge. And so again, this is why my end users, right? She's playing the role of being helpful, right? Because she realizes he's from IT or whatever. But at the end of the day, she wasn't educated enough to know that her badge is her identity within our organization, and no one else should have that, right? So in a third, and I guess along the same lines of insider threat would be my admins, because misconfigurations can lead to breaches. So it's those conversations being had with the IT teams, and again, just bringing that security as a culture mindset to the organization and helping them understand. So these would be, when I'm looking at my organization right now, some of the threats that I think, we're facing and some of the things that we have to address.
Yeah, I'll pile on there a little bit. I think when we think about insider threats, we think about the malicious insider who's either there to steal stuff or has a grudge and wants to damage things. So it's not just about data theft, it's also about, doing damage to technology or to systems. So we think about the malicious insider, and we think about, let's call them the uneducated insider, the person who doesn't know any better and makes a bad choice. They click on shit and they shouldn't. They email the wrong people confidential information. They don't mean to, it's just an accident. I think there's a third piece that is really outside the control a lot of the time of the security team, and that is where you've just got a really complex or poorly written process that relies on technology, and the person is doing all the right things, but because the system is so complex, they don't realize that in doing the right thing, they end up exposing data, or they end up somehow doing something that's insecure. So, we in security, we have a tendency to sort of look on our end users being problems. You've heard the old trope, we're only as strong as our weakest link, and our weakest link are our people. Well, that's probably a little bit true, but it's not because there's not good intent of our people, and it's not because people aren't trying to do the right thing. Sometimes we make things so damn complicated that it's impossible to do the right thing from a security perspective. And so, we really, when you're a security leader, or even when you're an app dev person and you're building your app, you've got to think not only how do you intend people to use an app, but how are they going to use the app regardless of what your intentions are? And how does that fit into the business process of why they're using the app in the first place? And you've got to think about all of those things and be able to code in security for those events as well. And so the threat actors can be the application developers who are developing things, but not thinking about security or privacy or redundancy or whatever the situation is as part of their development lifecycle too.
Yeah, that's a good point. You've got me thinking about something here. You brought up how we can make systems so complex that even the privileged, non-malicious insider can cause. Why do we make it so complex for our users? But then it seems like it's so easy for these state-sponsored actors and others to come in and penetrate our network. Any thoughts around that?
I don't think the intent is to make it complex. I think we start off with a green field, and our business priorities tell us we've got to deal with X, Y, or Z. It's really hard to keep an eye on the big picture. And a lot of what we're doing now is at scale, right? So even if you're a startup and you go, no problem, I'm going to use the G Suite and I'm going to put everything in the cloud. Well, the cloud is by itself, without you doing anything, inherently complex, right? So how do you make sure that the way you're using the cloud is right? And how do you understand how the cloud works? And how do you understand not only how the cloud works, whether that's Google or Azure or AWS or whoever, but how do they work on the back end, right? So it can be, again, thinking that security isn't just about data confidentiality. It's also about data integrity. It's about data availability or system availability. And it also has components of privacy and ethics built into it as well. It's enough to blow your brain. Just, it's inherently risky to be doing tech. It's inherently risky to be using tech. And that's just where we are right now. We're trying. so many vendors, including the Cisco, who I work for. We're trying to do things as simply as possible, but they're really complex environments that we're working in. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll echo that as well, right? I think there's also complexities or constraints within some of the systems that we have to use as part of those processes, and so which makes it, hard from an IT perspective. Number one, to secure, whether it be regulations. For example, obviously, having worked in a hospital, we have systems that have some regulatory requirements that we have to abide by, and in talking to some of these vendors, they won't allow you to add additional security controls to some of these systems, which makes it a lot harder for you to secure, which obviously makes it a lot easier for your threat actors to entry into, right? So going to back to your point, about why is it that it's complex and hard for us, but easier for the threat actors. Sometimes it's just regulatory reasons that tie our hands, and there's nothing you can do until it's popped, and then you're screaming bloody murder, right? Like, what the F?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of job security for us though, right? But anyway, so we have a question in the chat, and I think, Tony, this is a good one for you to talk about, some of the things that you've been doing around security awareness to combat some of these threat actors. So how is the gap between the security team and the end user bridged and improved?
I think, again, I've been at LMH for about a little bit over a year. My focus, or one of my top 3 focuses for this year, 2021, has been around security awareness. A couple of things we're really trying to do is, or what I'm trying to do is get my team face to face with the business, so they know who we are and they understand the message that we're bringing, right? And another thing we're doing is providing the business a way to connect with us directly. So if they see something, as we're instructing them from a security awareness perspective,
Looks like Tony froze there. Am I the only one seeing that? Are you
Okay. He's frozen.
Yeah. Man, it sounded like he's about to give something great too.
Yeah. So I'll jump in and you wait. Tony will unfreeze and talk right over the top of me. But one of the things we did at Ohio State, I was fortunate enough to have an amazing team of folks who worked in the security awareness and training space. One of the things that we really worked hard at was helping people understand how to secure themselves and their families, especially as we went to work from home, right? So my quite cynical view is that most people don't really give 2 cents for the security of the company data. Like, it's not something they're emotionally invested in. They'll do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, but it doesn't tug at their heartstrings to make sure that company data is protected. But they do care about themselves. They care about their family. They want to make sure their kids are protected online. They want to make sure that their tax return doesn't get pre-filed. They want all of that stuff. So one of the things that we did, Alyssa, to help bridge that gap is spend effort on helping people how to understand how to be secure at home, with the thought that if they learn good security hygiene at home, they'll bring that behavior with them into the office. So we talk about things like how a password manager makes it easier to deal with your banking online, and how having a VPN helps protect you as you're traveling, and all of those kinds of things. And how do you set up a home network so that you're protecting your kids' gaming from your work PC or laptop to your home PC? How do you segregate your home network? Topics like that. How do you set up your privacy controls in Facebook or your social media platform of choice? Those kinds of things actually went a really long way to making sure that people were thinking about security. And then they would come into the office and go, oh, that thing looks like a fish. We were also doing phishing training. That thing looks like a fish. Why can't I have a password manager for my work accounts? Oh, you want me to use MFA at work? Yeah, no worries, because I'm using that at home with my banking. This is no big deal for me, right? So those kinds of things were really great bridging opportunities, actually. So.
Yep, I echo some of that. I think I got disconnected earlier, so I'm not going to go into my little soliloquy because I was going down a whole rabbit hole. But I'll just I'll just echo what Helen said, right? I think the big key to bridging that gap is security awareness, just helping your users understand the role they play in helping keep the organization's data safe, right? It's key. And as Helen said, it's all about helping them identify how what you're helping them understand relates to them, right? How they can use what you're teaching them in their own personal life. And then it becomes something that they're willing to use, and then it becomes a habit, and then, help keep the organization safe that way. I think it really just does focus on that security awareness piece.
Helen, looks like you got a question in the chat there.
I see that. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't think everybody is equal risk, and I do think there is a space to be had for targeted and tailored training. So certainly from a tech perspective, I'd be looking to make sure that the people who have access to data that is more than their own, which I know in some companies can mean everybody, but let's call them privileged users. I think privileged users can be misused sometimes it can be too limiting. I'm not just talking about domain admins, right? I'm talking about people who can promote code to production. I'm talking about executive assistants who have access to executives' mailboxes as well as their own. I'm talking about marketing people who have access to multiple social media accounts. Those kinds of privileged users, I think, need to be trained on how to be secure in the job that they do. So certainly we can talk about how to secure a network, or how to secure a technology stack, or how to code appropriately. But it's not just about how to configure an environment. It's got to be also, how do you do the processes that you're asked to do in a secure way? And I think a lot of the targeted security training that we've relied on for a long time tends to be internet-based CBT based on technology. And if we're really going to be secure at work, every company does things in their own unique style. You just got to change jobs to know that that's true, right? So there's going to be something that has to be locally relevant to the person that you're doing the training on. But yeah, absolutely. From an incident response perspective, I would be surprised if there aren't security companies out there that haven't identified higher risk people from lower risk people, that don't put additional protections around higher risk people, whether that's making them go through more training, or whether that's extra monitoring, or whether that's some kind of network segmentation, whatever. So yeah, you can't treat everybody the same. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Tony, as well, but I know that our team also uses metrics on some of those phishing tests that they sent out, right? And that's useful for us, me and my team, on how we report on different issues. Doggy made an appearance. Oh, I can die happy now. It's the cutest dog ever. Making my ADD go wild though, Helen. And so, yeah, so when we see, Cardinal being a global company, we see particular regions of the world clicking more than others, then that's where I think something a little more targeted could be beneficial. Yeah. How do you structure your phishing tests, Tony? Do you guys do anything like that?
Yeah, we have quarterly campaigns that we do, and we have our active users, the folks that are always clicking on shit, like Helen said just a while ago. those folks get added to a list, and we do targeted training with them, right? But then even beyond that, we've put a program in place, and we're starting to execute on it, looking at metrics from our email gateways, right? And we're learning who are the most targeted people in our organization, right? And we're taking real life samples from some of the attacks or some of the emails or target the attacks that they would have been seeing, and are having training around that, right? With real life samples. Here's what we're saying, and here's how to identify these things. Here's the route for communicating these things with us, so we can take appropriate action if they were able to get through. Obviously, your C-suite, they're always targeted as well. So helping them understand what we're seeing in the wild, helping them understand what's happening in other organizations. And again, just pulling samples from what we're seeing hit our four walls as well, and helping them understand. And Helen's point, your admins, your app dev folks, helping those guys understand their role and how to approach coding and things like that. So yeah, we absolutely do targeted training. There's still a bunch to learn about that organization, but those are some of the key areas I think we're focusing on right now.
Yeah, we speaking of executives, something really cool, plug for my team, I have to do it. We do these OSINT projects where we literally target a executive. Basically, we've been doing them once a month now, just to continue to get that buy-in from them, from the top down, and have them, become believers in that threat intelligence, and that this is what can be gathered on you. And I mean, we grab everything, I mean, from, family information, and we explain to them how the different people in your family expose you in a whole nother light, right? You can gather so much information about somebody from different areas. So with that being said, Helen, and the advice that you give as an advisor, what's that look like from phishing, security awareness, all of that? Have you had to do anything like that? Or you could talk from a CISO perspective.
Yeah, so from a CISO perspective, we did. I will tell you my philosophy. My dog just thinks I'm taking for a walk. My philosophy has changed a little bit since we started doing phishing exercises. So the traditional phishing exercise sort of goes out and does something that looks like a fish, and you send it out to people, and they either click on it, they don't. And typically we call it training. And if they click on it, you immediately send them off to like a website that says, hey, this was a fish, and you could have recognized this as a fish by these 5 things. And we call it training. And it gives people an adrenaline jolt, because they're like, oh shit, I did something wrong. And they remember it, and hopefully they don't do it again. The problem is that the attackers are much more sophisticated about what their phishing looks like. And our internal people keep sending real email that looks like fish, and our jobs are to click on shit. Like, so on the one hand, you're saying, do your job, click on stuff, but don't click on stuff. Don't click on that stuff, the stuff that looks like stuff that isn't stuff, but we don't want you to get, and they're like, ah. So I've come to think that it puts a security team in a really dodgy position to do phishing training like that, because to make it enticing enough for people to click on, you do something that is emotional, and then when they find out that you were just testing them, they hate you. So we've seen situations where it's like, hey, click here to see the bonus that you're going to get, and like there's no bonus, or click here to get your immunization, and no. And people are like, I hate the security team. So I think we have some opportunity to rethink the phishing thing. Having said that, when we did phishing, I was actually surprised at Ohio State. Not surprisingly, students click on phish at much higher rates than employees do. Go figure. But the interesting thing is that the employees would go, well, these students today, they grew up with technology in their pocket. Like they should know technology. They know what they're doing. Yeah, no, students don't know what they're doing. So if you're working with any high school, college, straight out of college students, do not assume they know what they're doing, because they don't. So I would just say that. So in terms of high risk people, if you want to get all ageist for a second, think about, is it the old people in the office that you want to worry about, or the young people in the office that you want to worry about? Like, who's going to be more risky to you in your environment? And and I would tell you, get 5 people in a room to talk about it, and they're going to have 5 different opinions. But yeah, it's a thing. So sorry, rabbit hole. Security awareness is a funny thing, isn't it?
It is. The way that I combat phishing is I just don't check my email. If I don't see an email, I don't click on anything, right? So highly recommended. If you want to get a hold of me, you IM me or you text me. If you don't have my number, then you shouldn't be getting a hold of me.
Yeah.
So I want to touch on, unless Tony, did you have anything to add to that?
I was going to say, I'm going to hit you up on the side so you can teach me your skills, because I can't get.
So I want to pivot back a little bit and talk about state-sponsored actors, but I do want to touch on Joe's question. How long does it typically take intruders to access vulnerable data once they breach the firewall? So I personally think that depends on sophistication, right? And what we see and what we read is that those highly sophisticated threat actors, they like to breach and then they sit, right? Learn the environment before they actually go after anything. So anything to add to that?
You know, fortunately for me, I've not worked at an organization that was breached in that capacity. I mean, I've worked a large incident response, you know, some time back, but it wasn't that sort of breach where they actually landed on our systems and actually took data. But what I can say from having sat through penetration tests, I've seen it varied, man. I mean, I've seen instances where a pen tester will gain access to a network, and within, I think the quickest I saw them have access to a privileged account was 5 minutes. And then I've seen where it's taken days before they can actually maneuver and get to anything sensitive. But yeah, I mean, it really does depend on the maturity of the person that's actually doing the exploit, right? And how much, you know, how much skills they have, and what tools they're able to leverage to get at that data.
I think the way you asked the question, Joe, was interesting in terms of how long after they've breached the firewall do they, you know, can they act? Right now, we're seeing folks act without having to go near the firewall. So, you know, I think the challenge is the interface between the users and the devices and the data stores that you're going after. So we're seeing attack patterns where they go through the people, they spoof somebody, they do man-in-the-middle attacks, whatever, and they pretend to be an individual. Or they get on an endpoint with some kind of malware and they use that to move into the data store, whether that's a cloud-based or an on-prem data store. And so I think the attack method also changes the timelines. I agree with Tony and Samara. I think it's definitely the sophistication and what they're trying to do, right? If they're just doing a smash and grab, they'll be fast. If they want to be an advanced persistent threat so they can scoop up all the intel they can get over a 6-month time period, they're going to be lower and slower. Not completely lower and slower, but still not, they're not going to be, you know, a 24-hour in and out. So, and we certainly see things like ransomware, which again is more of an availability threat than a data theft or a data compromise threat, despite how you may think of it from a regulatory perspective. Ransomware can happen super fast. So, so yeah, it's an interesting thing, but it's not just about getting over the firewall anymore. So just be a little bit careful about that. Make sure you're thinking expansively about where actually your points of weakness are.
Sorry. So I got sidetracked a little bit there. Endpoint. Yeah. Hey, Jeff. Good to see you, man. Me
Glad
and
to be
Jeff
here.
work together. So yeah. Oh, you can unmute yourself.
I can.
You
I can
guys
figure it
unmute.
out.
Yeah.
My security architecture guys can figure that out.
Oh, wow. Surprised me.
I
Well
know.
done. Yeah, if you guys want to, jump on, ask a question, you can use raise your hand and we'll call on you. You can unmute and talk to us a little bit. So talking about state-sponsored actors, I tend to have a very, and I don't know if this is, my threat intelligence background and things of that nature, but I tend to be very pessimistic when it comes to this. And I think that, talking about getting got, Helen, if a state-sponsored threat actor is coming after you, for me, you're gonna get got, right?
Probably.
What do you think? You like that? You're gonna get got.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people have been wringing their hands over SolarWinds like it's a brand new thing, but there's been a number of supply chain attacks over the last 5, 7, 10 years that have used similar, if not exactly the same tactics. This is not new. So yeah, if they want you, they're going to get you. I'm with you. I don't know that that's pessimistic so much as pragmatic.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with time and resources, anyone can get got. I mean, and state actors they're going to have time and they're going to have the resources necessary. If they really want you, they're going to get you.
Yeah. I think what I'm seeing as a result, and I'd be interested how everybody else on the call is seeing this or feeling about this. For the longest time, I think we talked about spending a lot of money and a lot of energy on defensive controls. So, identifying where we had stuff, where all of our assets were, where all of our data is, and then thinking about how do we defend it. And I think all of those things are still true, but I think the pivot for security teams now is really around detection and response. So yeah, we still invest in understanding our asset and our threat profile and our attack surface and all that stuff. But really the effort is, if something does happen, how quickly can we pick it up and how quickly can we respond and recover from it as well. And I don't think as an industry we're doing so good at the detect piece yet. I think we're working on the recover piece, but the detect piece is really interesting. And I keep talking about SolarWinds. I know it's not the only event that we've ever had to deal with, but those actors were in the environment for months, if not years. Like, we don't even really know yet, at least months, and more than one actor in the environment for more than months. So I think we've really got to work out how we're going to be able to do that detection. And I don't think we can do it alone. I think it is going to be private-public partnerships with DHS and CISA and in the US at least, those kinds of sort of federal agencies, our ISACs, but also our vendors. Our vendors have a lot of data and threat intel that we need to have access to and be able to consume it and use it. So it's going to be a team sport, actually, I think. I don't know. What do you guys think?
So to your point about SolarWinds, right? I know you went there. I read an article earlier. I think it was actually earlier today, where this cybersecurity firm out of Switzerland actually hacked a group of servers owned by this hacking group called Silverfish, where based on what they were able to find, they saw 4,700 organizations worth of data on those servers, right? So to your point, this threat actor, this hacking group, they were able to exploit that SolarWinds vulnerability on 4,700 organizations. And this is just one threat actor, right? And so this is just to your point, just how widespread that could be.
Did you see the report this week? did you see the report this week that said they were attacking cyber insurance companies to get the customer lists because they knew that the customers are more likely to pay because they have cyber insurance?
Sure.
It's like, damn, can't win for trying.
Can't win. No, but to your point about detection and response, and I think you're absolutely right. But I'm curious to get your thoughts, having worked in a heavily regulated industry, working at OSU. Do you feel that some of those regulations contribute to your ability to defend and respond, or do you feel as though it's more of an adherence? Curious to get your thoughts on that.
I think they help because they get the attention of people who wouldn't care otherwise. So I think they help. I think the danger of regulation, I was having a conversation with some colleagues today, the danger of regulation is that it enforces a risk management practice that may not work in your particular environment. So it's a regulator saying, hey, I think you should do X because when I think about risk, this is important to me. But that doesn't mean that in your business context, it makes sense. And so regulation comes across as this really heavy-handed sort of everything looks like a nail and all I got's a hammer. I'm going to get my analogies back to front. You know, that kind of problem, and regulation isn't surgical and it isn't nuanced. And so that then becomes a problem for a security team who has to work either in a single regulatory environment or a multiple regulatory environment. When I was at JP Morgan, we had, you know, we were in 70 countries and we had conflicting rules between Singapore and Geneva. And like to the point where the business had to say, are we going to even continue doing business in this country? Because they fundamentally conflicted with one another, the regs. So yeah, it can make life really difficult. But as a general philosophy, I see regulations as being the base level compliance, and that does help with security to a certain degree. It doesn't help with risk. It helps with security, which is different.
Okay,
Yeah.
Point taken. And I agree with that. I think it does help enable in some degree, but I think where folks like myself and some other organizations would struggle from a regulatory perspective is when we're looking at either rules we have to follow, processes, and technologies, and we're looking to implement all three, but don't have the proper support to maintain all three. And that itself could be a threat and a risk to an organization.
Absolutely.
Because now we're bringing on technology, we're building our processes, and no one really knows what to do with these things. And they sit there with vulnerabilities on them that can potentially get you popped. So
right on.
I think if I had all the money in the world, it'd be great, but
you'd still get popped though, Tony. I wouldn't worry.
Yeah, I should have changed the title. So we touched on risk a little bit. So I got triggered, right? Because in threat intelligence, we have to not only learn and understand about the threats and the vulnerabilities that we have within our network threat externally to us, but we have to effectively communicate that risk up and across, right? I try to be as objective as possible with these things and have, ratings and, quantitative, qualitative. What have you all seen that has been successful? Tony, Helen, people in the audience, when it comes to communicating that risk effectively?
Actually, one of the best tools I've ever seen has been tabletop exercises. I know it ain't sexy, but one of the, you would think at a university they'd be really data driven. The problem when you put data in front of a whole bunch of university PhDs is that they immediately question your methodology and that the message gets lost, right? So don't lead with data if you're going in front of a PhD. Just want to throw that out there. But it always is a challenge to be able to get them to see the risk that the way you see it. And I think one of the biggest issues, and we touched on this earlier, is this question of sort of imminence. Is something a risk? Yes. If it happened, could it cause bad things to as a result? Yes. Is it likely to happen today? No. Well, actually, yes, it is likely to happen. No, it's not. I got bigger things to worry about right now than this. I don't believe you, Helen. This is not going to happen today, until it does. And then they're like, oh my God, the world's on fire. So I think it's really hard to do that. But if you can put them in a situation where they can see themselves in the situation, they can feel themselves experience the consequence, they are more likely to put urgency around the issue. And so, yeah, for me, tabletops are a thing. They get there. And the funny thing is, thanks to COVID, like if I'd have gone to my executives and said, I'm going to do this tabletop, and the scenario is, you know, we're going to have major, all the O days are going to happen like in a month period of time. And also, by the way, the entire workforce is going to be working from home because of an international pandemic. And oh, by the way, like everything else that happened, right? The whole election stuff, Black Lives Matter, like think of the dumpster fire that 2020 was. If I'd have come up with a tabletop scenario around that, I would have been fired. Like they would have been, this is so unrealistic. It would never happen. Helen, you're just FUD all over the place. And now they're like, I could put like aliens landing in the middle of Ohio State and taking over, and they'd be like, okay. So, you know, I think, hey, use COVID for what it is. There is nothing off the table anymore in terms of scenario.
You know, for me, it's still something I'm learning to help the organization understand the risk, impact, and whether or not we're susceptible to it at the very moment that I'm bringing it up. So, you know, I don't have any sexy stories other than I'm still learning about how to do that effectively. But one thing that I've seen that I'm using as a tool is the risk acceptance process, right? Helping the business understand, okay, well, here's this risk, here's my impact, here's the likelihood of this thing happening here in this organization. You understand? Perfect. Oh, you don't want to do anything about it right now? Perfect. You sign that I've explained this risk to you, and you're accepting responsibility for, I mean, obviously still going to fall on me, right? Because I still lead the security organization. But at the end of the day, I would have done my due diligence. I would have done my job in expressing the risks to the business. Them understanding the risk would sign off on it and say, okay, they understand, they're willing to at least help put a timetable around when we can actually remediate the issue, right? So there's a document out there that's saying, hey, we've talked through this, they understand it's a business decision for them to go away with not remediating it at this very moment, right? So that's one tool I'm using, but I'm still learning how to effectively communicate some of these things.
I actually love that, and I will likely steal it and pick your brain a little bit more later, as I am now the owner of that process at work. But anyway, so we're coming up on the end of the episode here. So if there aren't any other questions, I would like for each of us to go through and just leave something with the audience, if that's cool with y'all. So for me, it is, if you have any cyber friends, if you're in cyber, first, give yourself a hug because you need it. I know you do. It's been tough, right? Give them a hug, and everything's going to be okay. Jeff, hugs, I don't know. But so picking him out, Tony knows what I'm talking about. So Helen, do you have anything to leave with the audience before we pivot?
Threats are everywhere. Your life is over as you know it. Doom, and doom. No, you just, this is not a thing that we'll win. It's a journey that we're on. It's a thing we're striving for. What we're really striving for, I think, in security is to be able to have a company that people can trust, have it be part of a team that people can trust. And some of that is about, putting in place tools and processes that allow us to respond to events like this and threat actors like this, and then recover from it with as minimal pain as possible. And that's what we're all here for if we're in the security space. So if you're not in the security space and you want to know more about it, you can always hit any Tony, Samara, or me up on LinkedIn, I'm sure. And we'd be happy to talk some more. But yeah, threats, man, they're everywhere.
Yep. So I'll echo what Helen just said. Jeff, I do love you, man. I miss you too, bro. I ain't seen you in a minute. But outside of that, really, take care of yourselves and take care of your data. I mean, be mindful of what you're posting, be mindful of what you're sharing, and pay attention to the security team of respective organizations when they tell you don't click on shit. That's it.
That's actually a perfect segue because I wanted to talk about episode 2. It's actually about personal security. And get this, in the title, it says, don't get got. I don't know how we got there in this episode, but it is literally titled that, okay? I think it's April 27th. So I'd like to see the same faces if possible, okay? Thank you all for joining. It's been a blast. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Helen. Y'all are the best.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you.
See ya.
Sorry, there is a quick poll if
Oops.
anyone's sticking around. That's fine. Quick poll if anyone's sticking around could take it. And if you want to sign up for the TechLife email thing, newsletter, that's in the chat.
Okay, I filled it out too. Next time I'm gonna remember.
No, it's like I don't know how the timing should work for this because it's like I don't want to do it while people are talking,
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna. We'll remember next time. If I don't, Helen, you got it right. You totally remember, right?
We'll get there.
Okay. All right. It's good to see everybody.
Thank you all.
See ya.